Young British pilots joining the Indonesian airline Susi Air find themselves facing up to the biggest challenges that exist in aviation.
We have volcanoes to put up with every day. We have runways that could be little tiny mud strips on the side of mountains.
Weather can change at any moment, within like a few minutes. Dogs, pigs, and people trying to cross the runway.
It's scary as hell when something like that happens.
But it's not just the extreme flying they must take on.
Yeah, there's many things out in Indonesia. I want to try and bite you, get into bed with you.
There's a lot of tropical diseases out here. We've got dengue, malaria, typhus. Basically everything out here wants to get you.
There have been 128 plane crashes in Indonesia over the last 20 years. But despite the country's poor aviation record, intrepid airline boss Susie has built a company worth millions of pounds.
All I need is that the crew is ready to fly above 100 hours every month.
She's one of the most powerful women in Indonesia and is renowned for her no-nonsense approach.
Susie is definitely not the sort of person you want to cross. Yeah, if you cross Susie, she will come down on you like a ton of bricks.
Susie started out with just 2 planes. 10 years later, she has nearly 50, flies to 168 destinations across the country, and has a constant demand for new pilots.
Susi Air is the best choice that a new, fresh graduate pilot could ever get in the world.
If they're prepared to accept the risks that come with flying out here. Today, 28-year-old Captain Dave Burns is flying some of Susie's most valued passengers.
We've taken out some seats at the back of the aircraft here, ready to go and pick up 13 boxes of fresh live lobster from the island of Simelu.
His family were dead set against his move to Indonesia.
My parents were like, "Oh, what are you doing? It's a dangerous country. There are many aviation accidents in Indonesia. We don't want you to go for the job."
Having left behind careers as a car salesman and as a burger flipper, Dave's ultimate goal now is to fly a jumbo jet back home. But he also shares Susie's money-making ambitions.
My long-term goal is to earn loads of money, live in a nice house and just fly a big plane and have a hot wife. But at the moment, I'm putting up with Susie Air. Can you just make sure that's locked for us?
Flying from Medan on the northern island of Sumatra, Dave will be picking up the Lobsters 300 miles to the west from the island of Simelu. But a build-up of heavy clouds at the destination is preventing him from taking off. They're not allowed to land unless they can see the airstrip from 5 kilometers away.
We've got the battle with the weather to see whether whether our aircraft is going to successfully land once we get to Simelu visually.
Dave knows only too well how badly things can go wrong for pilots in Indonesia.
My time in Susi Air, we've been through 3 accidents, and I've lost friends being killed in plane crashes. Number 1, the aircraft was overweight and they were flying towards a high mountain range and the aircraft just couldn't climb over that mountain range. Accident number 2, one of the local tribal guys was walking across the runway. He was apparently deaf and couldn't hear the plane coming. Number 3, my good friend died in that accident. When the aircraft had a fuel problem, he was only 100 meters away from safely landing on the road. It's a realization about life and that how you're not invincible and how anything can happen.
The Lobsters are a huge moneymaker for Susie, but have to be delivered fresh. So despite the threat of poor visibility, the airplane dispatcher is under pressure for them to be collected as soon as possible.
He's come out personally. So there's going to be an issue. Hi, Denny.
I want you must landing in Simelu, because it's impossible this Lobster flight with you, okay? You're not landing, problem with me.
Okay, I want to speak to Charles before we make that decision.
Oke, ya.
Okay.
Ya ini dia mau ngomong dulu sama Charles kalau cuaca bagus dia terbang sekarang ini. Lagi boarding Bang, lagi boarding.
If I don't land and I don't get the lobsters, then the lobsters aren't going to be fresh, and this is the pressure that we have.
The captain has responsibility for making the final call on whether it's safe to take off.
Yo, dude. What's the weather exactly? He says the weather is at least 5 kilometers, which is completely legal for us to fly. So I've just called boarding and we'll go and pick up the lobsters.
India Air 135, contact director 1.
That's again.
Once in the air, Dave has to navigate another major hazard pilots often experience flying from Medan: bird strike.
If you could keep count of the birds for me.
If a bird ends up going through the engine, then we could have an engine failure and be preparing for emergency landing.
Bird strikes are a real threat to flight safety. A forced emergency landing in the jungle-covered terrain would almost certainly lead to casualties, if not deaths. Without the advanced technology you would find on a jumbo jet, it's down to the pilots to visually navigate their way through any hazards.
It's very tricky, very, very tricky. It takes a lot of skill. When you compare it to the airliners back at home, there's a lot more hands-on flying.
And also, unlike the big jet airliners, they get no support from air traffic control on landing.
Because these airports have no instrumentation to help us land, so it's literally our feet, our hands, and our own eyes.
Despite the bird strike threat and the visibility issues, Dave safely navigates his way into Simelu, and Susie's urgent lobster cargo is waiting on the tarmac.
So we've arrived to pick up our little passengers. Keeps on growling at me. 1 kilo of these lobsters is £27, and today we're carrying 280 kilos back to Medan, ready to go onto the dinner plates around Asia. So we better make sure they have a safe flight back to Medan.
Airspeed is alive. 60 knots.
But there's a problem. Dave's weather radar is warning him of storm clouds gathering off the coast of Sumatra, moving towards his intended path. Only a few weeks ago, a similar small plane crashed in Indonesia, killing all 4 people on board after a lightning strike broke off the plane's wing.
We have all these build-ups and storms started building right the way along the coast. So we need to make sure we stay away from these storms at a safe distance.
What makes matters worse is the storms blowing in from the east, forcing Dave to navigate too close for comfort to one of Indonesia's active volcanoes. Mount Sinabung last erupted just 3 weeks ago, blowing thick volcanic ash into the air for miles around. These ash clouds can be catastrophic to aeroplanes.
If we fly through an ash cloud, if it is a very dense ash cloud, it could shut down the engine, and we would never get the engine back, and then we would have problems.
With no pressurized cabin on the Cessna to maintain oxygen levels, they can't fly high enough to go over the clouds. With only basic instrumentation, they'll have to navigate through the storm by sight, looking for gaps in the cloud to see the terrain ahead.
The volcano is slightly to the right there, so let's go with the original plan through that gap.
While also checking there are no planes in their path.
Go slightly to the left. Let's go through that gap there. Okay, to the right, please. Yeah, let's head through that. I'm not happy going through this. Let's go over there. I know. Go up there. Let's go through this.
Having made it past the volcano, Dave now finds the storm closing in as he approaches the airport.
Can you go slightly to the left towards Perth? Still no sight to the runway. 80 knots. Got the runway lights in the sky.
500. Minimums. Minimums.
Great.
Thanks to some skillful maneuvering and nerves of steel, the plane and its cargo reach their destination.
We got back safely. The problem is the heat builds up in the afternoon. It builds and builds and builds and just turns into thunderstorms across Sumatra. The area of Sumatra between the Indian Ocean and the Malacca Strait is just one big heat machine that just generates the worst storms in Indonesia.
All of the pilots at Susi Air have to come to terms with the risks that come with their job every time they get into a plane.
It's a challenging experience flying for Susi Air because we have to deal with all kinds of dangers every single day.
Susi Air HQ in Pangandaran is where the new recruits receive their training. 26-year-old former professional poker player Nick Holmes has gambled his life in the UK for the chance to train as a pilot with Susi Air.
Failure isn't an option. There's no other job waiting for me back at home or anywhere else.
So far, Nick has struggled on his test flights.
A bit too much? Yeah. Oh shit.
So a bit fast. Pitch up, pitch up.
Pitch up.
Oh, no. Not demonstrate that again.
If this doesn't work, then I have no idea what I could do.
Today, it's Judgment Day. After just 6 weeks of training, Nick's taking his final test flight, which will determine whether or not he'll get the job.
Ready for takeoff.
The flight assessments that we do are very important. If a pilot does badly during flight training and he cannot land the airplane comfortably and nicely, he will not go on and be a line pilot.
That's been allowed.
To pass the test flight, Nick must show alertness of all potential dangers.
Traffic.
Negative traffic.
The warning signals another plane is close enough to threaten a mid-air collision. With no radar to guide them, they must find the danger with their own eyes before it is too late.
We have no visual. Traffic. Everybody look out for traffic.
It's got to be in the clouds somewhere.
There he is.
Exit.
You got him? Yeah, no factor. Let's go.
To complete the test, Nick will have to conquer something he struggled with throughout training: landing the plane.
When we fly passengers, they judge the entire flight, they judge the entire company based on how the touchdown was. So it's very important that our pilots are able to touch down the caravan without bouncing it and without making the passengers feel unsafe.
Caution, terrain.
Okay, look up.
To land safely, Nick must maintain the right height and speed of approach by pitching the plane at the correct angle.
Full. Don't say full. You have to look. When I say flaps, you need to check it. And then don't look here, look at the white one.
If he gets it wrong, Nick will have to decide whether to abort the landing or risk stalling and crashing.
Whoa. No. Don't chop the power before you get to the flare. Left rudder. I have control.
Control.
Safely back on the ground, Nick will now find out if he's graduated.
The flight was challenging, and I was a little bit confused about exactly the way things should be done. And yeah, a bit disappointed that I didn't quite get it.
Nick didn't do 100%, so he needed prompting and reminding, just because he was getting a bit overloaded. So, to sum things up, your final flight, it was okay. It wasn't great. A couple of times I see you sort of freezing up and busy flying the aircraft.
Yeah.
That will be fixed. You've passed the flight training. The fourth flight was the last. Well done.
Great.
Despite some mistakes, Nick has managed to qualify as a co-pilot. He'll be behind the controls of a plane full of passengers in just 4 days' time.
In the bag.
He needs to dramatically improve, or his fledgling aviation career could be over. All decisions on hiring and firing ultimately lie with no-nonsense airline boss Susie.
That's your problem. Maybe people are always nervous to see me. Many of my pilot things, I don't know. Sometimes I'm joking, I'm not gonna bite you, so come closer.
And she's just summoned Captain Dave Burns for a meeting at the company HQ.
I received a message saying that Susie wanted to see me for an interview for a management position in Medan. Although you don't really know what these interviews are about. Whether I'm in trouble, whether I've done something wrong, whether I'm being praised, whether I'm being promoted. You never know in this company.
Are you nervous?
Yeah, I am quite nervous.
The previous time Dave was summoned to see Susie, he was suspended from duty.
I was temporarily fired for a couple of weeks. It was really something you could describe as a cultural difference between the Western world and Indonesia.
Being a Brit abroad, Dave managed to make such a huge cultural gaffe that Susie immediately hauled him to Jakarta for a telling off he'd never forget.
Susie is quite tough to deal with.
I'm gonna find you another $50,000.
You've got to stay on the good side of her. She's very, very vocal about what she wants.
You cannot deliver your service.
He needs to impress his boss because a bad reference could damage his chances of his dream job with a UK airline.
Dave is a special character, so we had some bit bad experience with him.
Hire or fire? Who knows?
As with all of Susie's business affairs, the interview will be held in strict privacy.
My hands are all sweaty now.
I told him once, I say, watch your behave so you don't screw up your future. We see from the interview what he will do to convince me that the position is for him.
Dave will have to wait until the end of the week to hear her decision. Having finally graduated from the Susi Air flight school in Java, 26-year-old Nick is about to start his first posting in Medan on the island of Sumatra.
I have no idea where I'm going. I figured I'll just walk around, see if I can see people who might be from Susi Air. No, thanks.
Nick's only had a few hours in-air flight training with Susi Air, but now he's taking the massive step up to flying their passenger planes.
I am nervous about flying on the line because it's not going to be the same as the training. I want to appear to be confident and competent. I do worry that the captains will think, oh, this guy doesn't know anything, but I think realistically we can't be expected to know everything.
To add to the pressure, he's flying from the huge international airport of Kuala Namu, the second busiest in Indonesia, where he'll be sharing the runway with the big airliners. All new co-pilots are mentored by experienced captains. Nick will be under the watchful eye of Canadian Captain Jeff Lamb.
All the co-pilots have different experiences when they're new. Some are lazy, some are hardworking, some are trying too hard. So I can't wait to find out.
Nick will be flying to a strip that has a notoriously tricky final approach.
Pretty nervous about this first flight. I was looking in the route guide and it said recommended captains perform this approach. It's going to be quite challenging.
He's flying 230 miles to Ait Godang Airport in the center of Sumatra.
Okay, before taxi checklist, please. Do that first. Okay, sure.
Taxi
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
and number 20.
I have to remember. Yeah, to look at that.
Taking the huge step up to being responsible for all his passengers' lives is a lot of pressure. And Nick momentarily forgets what his job is.
Weather's a bit hazy, stay visual. Operationally standard takeoff. And threats, my first flight as a passenger. As a passenger? Flights, really? As a pilot.
Fortunately for Nick, his maiden passenger flight is blessed with the calmest weather Indonesia can offer. But there are other things to worry about. The airstrip is surrounded by mountains, so Nick will have to make a steep descent before banking sharply into the final approach to the runway.
Stay visual, look outside. The runway is over there.
Roger.
Look outside. You're flying in a lot of terrain. You have to keep your eyes outside.
Absolutely. Okay, approach looks really quite straightforward. It might not be, but...
You're a little bit low. No reverse.
Oh, no
reverse.
I think you said full reverse.
By mistiming the touchdown, Nick's passengers get a much bumpier landing than usual.
The heart rate started to climb up just a tad, yeah, just a little bit. It's probably one of the, not the best landings I've had, even in experiences in Africa. She was a bit over to one side, so that's one I will not be telling the wife about, that's for sure.
Oh, my landing was terrible. Yeah, it was kind of a baptism of fire, you could say. But yeah, we walked away from it. Could have been worse.
Above all else, Nick did manage to deliver his passengers in one piece. Next time, Dave finds out if he's got the job as base manager.
I think Susie likes my feistiness for some reason.
And mountain pilot Matt is dodging thunderstorms.
Thunderstorms could potentially pull the airplane apart. Wings will come off, that sort of thing. If the way it goes out here, Papa takes no business.